The diagram for Lesson 19, the last part of 1 Samuel. And what do we have? But we have a teeter-totter. The fulcrum is obedience and trust in God. Again, with the holy name of God there. David is ascending, Saul is descending. And we have the contrast of these two people. David, of course, is in flight from Saul. He is out in the desert wilderness in the southern part of Judah, where there's a lot of rough country that conceal him. There's a cave at Adullam. It's a haven. He delivers Keilah from the Philistines, although they turn around and are deceptive. But he hides in the wilderness of Ziph, in the wilderness of Maon and the Arabah, in the strongholds of En-gedi. It's very interesting to have a map, especially one showing terrain, to see where it is that David and his band of ruffians, which is actually all they were, he has good control of them. Wherever he is, he defends the neighboring farmers. He is trustworthy about not killing their flocks, and he expects a certain return from those farmers, which he usually may get, but certainly not when he meets Nabal, a surly guy who refuses to help David and his men. David's been an aid to the whole neighborhood. His men have been trustworthy. They haven't stolen anything. Now David would punish him. But beautiful Abigail saves the day. And David's weakness is pretty women. He thinks she's wonderful. She brings him abundant food. She flatters him. She's beautiful and smart. Her attitudes toward her husband are pretty poor. She calls him a fool. How could his heart rest in her? I don't have the best feelings about Abigail. However, she, after Nabal dies of a stroke or a heart attack, David calls for Abigail. She immediately comes. He marries her, and Michal, in the meantime, has been given to another man, but David also marries Ahinoam of Jezreel. So with these two women as wives, he must find a place to live. So he flees to Achish, the king of Gath, from Saul, and we have several different accounts of his relationship with the Philistines. At one point he acts mad. Well, how could a mad warrior be taken by the king of Gath, Achish, as his bodyguard? So there are some conflicting stories that circulate about his relationship with the Philistines. Whatever it is, he deceives Achish. He is out raiding the Philistines, but reporting to Achish that he's raiding the Judites, which of course would be Israelites. He's not doing that. He's actually deceptive, which is all right when it's your enemy, evidently. But as far as being obedient and trusting of God, David doesn't falter. Saul, in the meantime, is falling apart. He's disintegrating. He has had a victory over the Amalekites, and the memory of Israel is very long, and God's also. The Amalekites were the first to accost the people as they went into the desert after their deliverance from Egypt. Moses had a victory over them, but they were enemies, and they are still enemies, so Saul was to kill them in his victory. He saved the king, if you recall. He also saved some of the animals which were under the ban. They were already gods, The ban meant that these belong to God, no one else can touch them, kill them. That has to do with the people, too. To us, it's all immensely strange, way out of our ideas of justice. But this is Old Testament justice, and it's preparing for true light to shine in this dark world. So we accept what God has allowed and favored. The victory over the Amalekites then ends with disobedience on the part of Saul. As he is after David, there are several occasions when David could kill him. We see those occasions when David could easily have taken advantage of his ignorance, of his not knowing that he's very close by. At one time, David scolds his armor-bearer, Saul's armor-bearer, for not taking better care of him. And at the other point, he's in a cave relieving himself when David is further back in the cave and could easily have killed him. And in both cases, when Saul realizes that he's been spared, he's very appreciative and blesses David in both accounts, cave incident and the sword and the water jar incident in chapters 24 and 26. David is blessed by a very, what would we say, a very difficult thing to believe that Saul could do. He has a traitor inform him that David has been to Nob, the town of priests, and has taken showbread to feed his men, showbread meaning that sacred bread that was set out every day fresh, was part of the law of Moses, but David, in his need, is given the showbread to feed his men. But this evil man is a spy, and he carries the news to Saul, who sends forth and kills all the priests of Nob, including their wives and children, and only Abiathar escapes, bringing Urim and Thummim to David. This is going to bless David because he is serious about having God's will known to him in every circumstance. So Abiathar will draw Urim and Thummim, the yes and no of God, for David in all his undertakings. Going back to David's enthrallment with Abigail and having her become his wife, we look for that heart condition in the woman. And as I've just, I guess I've cast a certain pall over poor Abigail, in that her heart condition toward her husband was surely not that of an obedient or submissive woman. And if she had that heart that God blessed, we would know of her offspring as being very special to God. But we never hear another word. Her son that is born to her for David, Chileab, is never heard of again, and Abigail simply fades from any further incident about David. we'll find that many of the traditions that are written about in 1 Samuel have a double telling. And that's certainly the writers bringing together these stories when they are finally written down, long after David and the events have taken place. They know that they don't coincide, but they record them all. And this is because they are inspired by the Holy Spirit of God, and they are there for our edification. And we are to try to understand that even today, when an incident happens on a street corner, you're going to have more than one person telling a different tale, thoroughly convinced of his own understanding of what he has seen. So we have repeated stories that don't have the same elements. In the lower part of your page, you have a little diagram with David and Zariah, who is his sister. And that's because we're introduced to 3 nephews who will be very important to David in his kingship: Joab, Asahel, and Abishai. David will complain that he can't control them. On the other hand, he will be very dependent upon what they can do for him. So there we have a brief rundown of 1 Samuel 21 to 31, with David in the ascendancy and Saul slipping away. Part of that is so striking is the divination that goes on Endor with the woman who is a medium. Saul has cleansed the land of many of these types of false, they're sort of like a false prophet, aren't they? But anyway, this medium is left, and he goes to her to find out what will happen to him in the battle that's to ensue, and that's because Urim and Thummim no longer are answering him. God no longer is telling him. His disobedience has brought him to a place where God will not talk to him anymore through Urim and Thummim. So he goes to this medium to see what will be happening, and she calls up Samuel from the dead, the spirit of Samuel, who tells Saul that he and his sons will be dead by the end of that day, and with him in Sheol. Very frightening for dear Saul, but that is exactly what happens on Mount Gilboa. The death of Saul and his sons, including Jonathan, David's dear friend.